Despite the latest terrorist outrage in Paris, we can't lose sight of what's going on in Palestine. I'll be speaking to Michaela Anang. She has recently come back from the West Bank. She's a student at Northeastern University in Boston, and she's working for a spell at CODEPINK. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
So you were there, well, very recently during what's some are calling a new uprising. Around what dates were you in Palestine?
Well, I got into Israel on the 31st, but we went into the West Bank on the 1st until the 8th of November.
Mm-hmm. And did you go with CODEPINK or by yourself, or how was this arranged?
We took a delegation with CODEPINK of various activists and people from different organizations who were just going to kind of experience the local culture and life in the West Bank.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the more, let's say, dramatic things you saw while you were there?
Well, obviously, the occupation itself, just from moving from Israel into the West Bank, it was so prevalent. You could tell, you could feel it in the air. But specifically, some dramatic things that happened. We spent a night in Sabastia in a small village near Jenin, and that night my mom came into the room and she said, quick, grab your keffiyeh, come outside. And I was like, okay, sure. So I went outside, and there's a procession of cars with young men hanging out of the sides, cheering and smiling and laughing and waving Palestinian flags and giving their keffiyehs around. And they were celebrating the return of a young man who was about 20 years old, who had just been released from prison, Israeli prison, from the past 3 years for charges that had not been ever brought really to light, had never been corroborated. So they were all celebrating him coming home, and he came and he hugged the host of the guest house we were staying at, and the whole village was celebrating. And some of our members from our delegation were welcomed to the party there at his home, and they were getting food and drinks, and they danced and celebrated. But a few of us stayed back at the guest house and were talking to our host about the whole situation, and you know, in this feeling of happiness for his return, there was a sombering moment when a military vehicle, an Israeli military vehicle with an Israeli flag, drove by, and instantly the air just changed from one of celebration to one of fear. Mm-hmm. And it was very telling. This is an everyday occurrence for them. We turned to our host, and you know, we were worried, but he just brushed it off as if these things happen. I mean, potentially they're coming to take another young man from his home at midnight, but that just is the reality of living in the West Bank. So thankfully nothing happened in that instance, but you could just feel how moments of celebrations, and even for celebrations that, why are we celebrating something that shouldn't have happened in the first place? This young man shouldn't have been imprisoned for nothing, and yet we're celebrating, and yet celebrations can't even be continued to their fullest extent because of the occupation. So,
right. So what is I'm sorry. What is the general feeling? What is going on there? Is it a war with knife attacks and all kinds of raids? Is it mass outpouring? Is it a combination? What did you see?
I mean, obviously it's going to be different in every area that you're in, and it's going to depend on the population of people who are living there. The areas we visited were very peaceful, very calm. We visit a lot of farming families, and they're just people trying to get on with their daily lives, and it's being impeded by occupation. Even moments when we would share with our farming families, and we'd laugh, and we'd be talking about things that are just, you know, seemingly normal. It's like a normal conversation. then we would bring up something as simple as, oh, have you been to this city in the West Bank? No, because we don't want to go there because we fear violence and checkpoints. Or no, we know people who have gotten arrested there for various reasons. So it's definitely a tense time right now, especially when most people think that is the third intifada right now. But for families who are just trying to live their lives, the tension is muted but still there. So
now there's been a number of knife attacks, and I just saw from the Times that 2 Israelis were killed in a knife attack. Do people talk about that? Are some people in approval? Are they horrified? What are people saying?
Well, again, it's definitely going to depend on where you are and what the violence looks like. Most of the violence is in bigger metropolitan areas. Also, most of the time it's in the 48, so it's in Israel, or what is constituted Israel, and we spent most of our time in the West Bank. But I did meet with some friends in Tel Aviv and Nazareth, Haifa, who are student activists, and, they're constantly telling me about, the knifings and the violence, and they're scared for their own well-being because they are not violent people, but who knows if they could get caught up in something. But they really are just calling for peace and calling for an end to the occupation, which is the ultimate inciter of violence in the region. So you get varied reviews, but of all the people we met with, everyone was very into coming up with a solution to this issue and not tamping down the problem with more violence and making it worse.
I understand you went to the wall, which is sometimes called the segregation wall or the apartheid wall or the separation barrier. You went there in near Nablus or in Nablus. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I as a student, I'd learned about the wall. I'd seen videos of it. I've read about it. But we had a day with a campaign called Stop the Wall, and we met with him and we heard a little bit about the history, and then we took a bus and we drove right up to a wall, the wall, and it was incredibly sombering, the effect that you could see from this structure having been constructed in the middle of what used to be a thriving area of town. You could see beautiful buildings that had been boarded up, posters. There was a sign that said, welcome to this area, and everything was just closed and shut because the road was blocked by this wall. And so
how big is the wall? How tall is the wall?
How big is it? I'm actually not sure the exact height, but it's much, much taller than me, and I'm a 5'7" woman, but it seems so small when you're driving past it, and you're kind of in the hill. Palestine is such a hilly area, and it seems so small when you're driving around it. But when you walk right up to it and you put your hand on it, it's terrible. It's terrible, and it's so tall, and it's so divisive, and they're all around the settlements and also around these walls, or around these roads that are Jewish-only roads. And we actually drove on a Palestinian road that was directly beneath a Jewish-only road that led to an illegal settlement on Palestinian land. So
it was beneath the Jewish
beneath
road.
the road. So the Jewish road was built above this Palestinian road so that it could lead to the settlement, which is built usually above farming villages after the land is stolen. They're built on hills, usually overlooking these poorer communities, these poorer farming villages of Palestinian people who just have to look up at the land that was stolen from them to make these illegal settlements. So, yeah, it was incredibly moving to see that, here in the U.S. we talk about apartheid, and there's a lot of people who try to pretend that it's not real, but it is. It absolutely is. And when you put your hand on a wall that was meant to divide people and keep a certain population of people out of something that was theirs in the first place, that is apartheid. and that is oppression, and that is what occupation does.
You went to Ramallah?
Yes.
What, we hear of that of all places maybe the most prosperous. Did you see any signs of that?
Yeah, Ramallah was beautiful. Everyone was so friendly on the streets. It was bustling. People were walking around to the stores and markets and things like that. But every time they would hear us speaking English, they would always say hello. And they were really excited to see us. And everyone, everywhere we went, said thank you for coming. You're welcome here. And that was so nice that they were so welcoming and so optimistic and beautiful, beautiful people.
Mm. Do they talk about the Palestine Authority? Did you get into those kind of political things?
A few times, yeah, we did. For the most part, a lot of the people that I spoke to have major problems with the Palestinian Authority in that they have somehow become just like playing into the hands of the Israelis, and they're not representative of the majority of Palestinians or their desires or wants as a people. So, they're really not happy with the direction that the Palestinian Authority is taking or has taken or anything like that. So I think they're really longing for something different. But it's hard to do when they're not really afforded the same rights, not at all afforded the same rights as Israelis. So.
So this was your first visit to the Israel and the West Bank?
Yes, it was.
What about Israel itself? You went to Tel Aviv.
I did. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. You can really tell the difference between what is considered Israel and what is considered the West Bank because of the just development. And a lot of what my friends were saying is like the westernization of the area, which they have mixed reviews about. But, Israel, it's beautiful. And people were very nice, so I didn't really have an opportunity to interact with many Israeli people, other than, in shops and things like that. But the difference is pretty staggering between the West Bank and Israel, especially when we drove into Jerusalem. When we were coming from Ramallah, we were driving into Jerusalem, and we drove past the wall through a checkpoint, and whereas before the checkpoint there had been mixed license plates of white Palestinian license plates and yellow Israeli license plates, as suddenly we come to a point in the road where all the Palestinians have to take an exit ramp because they can't go into this part of Jerusalem, and suddenly all the license plates are yellow, and the streets are beautiful and clean, and the houses are developed, and the roads are perfect, and there's just a big difference. The infrastructure itself it's different.
So you got to see apartheid up close?
Yes, I did, and it's amazing. I think the most amazing thing to me was the fact that despite everything, everyone we met, every single person we met was so friendly in the West Bank. They were so welcoming, smiling, hugging us, giving us food, just saying every single time we went somewhere, you are welcome here. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for this interview.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
I've been speaking to Michaela Anang. Thank you to all the listeners. This is Stanley Heller for The Struggle.